as we await waves of drones sent over anytime this hour. All of this follows what happened earlier this morning when Israel says it targeted part of Iran's nuclear capability.
It's not even remote.
The Jewish state refuses to be a victim of the Iranians. I've made it clear time and again. Israel will never allow those who call for someone.
À ton tour de brider.
Threatening America, I think a lot of people would be saying, yeah, true, do it.
On détruit leur bouclier.
There has been no increase in the radiation levels at that facility. Fires broke out across the world. Take media today saying that 3 military commanders
L'arme feu. Continuons d'avancer.
scientists were also killed. In Washington, quickly responding, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying, quote, "We are not involved in strikes against protecting American forces in the region." President Trump also telling our veteran Red Bear, quote, "Iran does not have for several people leaving.
Aren't going to be and why is that?
To get into shelter as quickly as possible. The defense minister quickly declared a special state of emergency after this.
Accélérons un peu le mouvement. La chroma prise.
Yeah, that's right.
The IDF is also mobilizing thousands of troops as well as reservists. Expecting, but there is, of course, that caution that we are showing from our correct command.
Somebody says, for example, how many think would agree with if we bombed all the cartel leaders in Mexico? So popular, they made the second. So I mean, I think that pretty much says a lot by itself.
That people can stay a little bit further away from shelter.
So, yeah.
No one is here except for people who are going out to get groceries and stock up on water.
Getting all the essentials. And Alex, it is welcome news that you just reported that Israel does think that they can
Que l'encre coule.
towards Israel. Yes, people can potentially move about more freely than what they may have previously expected today. But they
Yeah, and they already said by this point,
Sans la prévenir.
say you can be under shelter. I mean, there might be a few bombs, but it seems like that's at this point.
war in Gaza now over 600 days. So, but now that
Bataille esquivée.
This came as quite a shock, of course. People who have lived here, people who are from here, they are used to going to the shelters. Getting those alerts that we receive on our phones, telling us exactly what is happening and who is being struck. Hamas, if it was Hezbollah previously before the ceasefire up in the north, or the Houthis in Yemen, when people went to the shelters this morning, it wasn't until later that they received the notification from the government that this was in fact an anticipation of an Iranian response after their preemptive
Voilà ta carte. Que l'encre coule.
exhaustion that people are feeling after being at war for so long. There's also the feeling
That's the way I think a lot of Americans see the where, how many of you guys saw the fucking giant?
Je suis prête.
Finesse
Et grâce.
But there's a lot, and they're popular too. A lot of people feel that way.
among the
Is that a
places
meme?
that
It's the truth.
Garde le feu.
I mean, with the amount given a drone warfare and the amount of technology we have, why the fuck would we send our ridiculous?
Needed to happen to prevent Iran from developing their nuclear capabilities
Yeah,
even
I
further.
agree.
Of course, this also comes at the same time as we were expecting to see more negotiations take place. Diplomatically, of course, we expect to see more conversations to try to bring people back to the negotiation table and bring down the temperature here in the Middle East.
Well, not back to the negotiation table. We'll bring in new people to the negotiation table. The old people aren't dealing with that. A little bit different.
C'est le mal. Ainsi soit-il.
On vacation.
Let's bring in Fox News contributor and former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman. Dan, it appears that the intel that went into planning this seems to be
Pas de panique.
involved with those
Je suis là.
major strikes. In other words, very targeted, very specific. What are you hearing from your sources, the intel community?
It's an extraordinary success where Israel was able to fuse their intelligence collection and operations on the ground with military operations to target Iran's nuclear facilities, as well as the means that Iran would use to conduct retaliatory operations against Israel. What Israel wouldn't exist if they didn't have this incredibly sophisticated intelligence capability. It's an extraordinary.
It is impressive. I have to say, and I think even people that hate Israel have to say that it is impressive how effective they are.
Accélérons le mouvement.
Success, and it's an ongoing success. Israeli operatives are on the ground inside Iran conducting covert operations as we speak.
What are the outcomes then will this end the evil that is the Iranian Revolution that started in 1979?
If they kill the main guy, that Khamenei guy, then yeah, I think a chance could happen. If this guy, if he's alive, then it's not going to happen.
On détruit leur bouclier. Je suis prête.
That's my guess.
Asking at this point the other more immediate questions are whether Israel has taken out enough of Iran's nuclear program. We've been tracking Israeli strikes on Natanz, essentially Isfahan, but it's more the underground facility that I think we need to be focused on as well. And I'm sure there will be questions in the coming hours today about whether Israel has been able successfully to target that site.
Voilà ta carte. La chroma
But Israel might have been using covert operations
They did.
as well.
Yeah.
As for long-term regime change, it's certainly possible, but I think we've got to be focused on what it looks like an all-out war between these two countries.
To that point, the
On détruit leur bouclier. En garde.
But it seems like
L'arme de feu.
the icon of that entire fucking I don't know, the main guy, right? Of the regime. So if he's there, then I don't think things are going to end good. He's the image of it. Yeah, he's the absolutely. Literally. People are walking on photos of him and shit like that. Yeah.
increased radiation levels at the Natanz.
Cette expédition n'est pas encore terminée.
Iranian authorities have also informed the IAEA that the country's
En garde.
hasn't been targeted. So with that in mind, in Iran, and if that
Civilian that the Russians helped
Une tempête approche.
build. And that is the question. Iran is in violation. The IAEA said that Iran was in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They've got
Who could have guessed? What a shock.
over
Wow.
400 kilograms of enriched uranium. No country would have that if they didn't want to develop a nuclear program. And so that is going to be a key issue for Israel and for the international community writ large to verify that Iran no longer has a
J'ai vu ton avenir.
It's highlighted Alex Hogan speaking about why we've been talking about Iran potentially weaponizing a nuclear weapon for years, and based upon your sources in the intelligence and what
C'est pas bon du tout.
Look, Iran is a nuclear threshold state, and so there's a confluence, I think, here that we've seen.
I mean, if you were the crazy people in Iran, would you want to make a nuclear bomb? Absolutely. You're surrounded by enemies. You have some of the most powerful enemies in the entire world. You need some form of mutually assured destruction so you don't get killed. Like, absolutely, they're going to try to make a bomb. Obviously, anyone would. Yeah, anybody in their position would do that.
Give Iran every opportunity to negotiate a way out of this crisis. President Trump had said that he had a roughly 2-month deadline and negotiations had taken place, but it was quite clear that Iran was playing for time and was defiantly opposing any real resolution to this growing crisis. The United States,
I think the implication was that they were just fucking people around to buy from more and because of that, that's the reason why these attacks happen.
The onerous sanctions that have crippled the
60
economy
days.
in return for Iran getting their simultaneously, Israel has taken out Iran's air defenses April a year ago.
Obéissez-moi!
As a means for Iran to retaliate
They killed the leadership of the terrorists. Basically, they took out their fucking air force, and now they're bombing the facilities directly, and they're attacking the actual scientists and the military leaders directly.
À
And
ton tour de
killing them.
briller.
So it seems like this is a multi-year plan that seems like it's working out in their favor.
On détruit leurs boucliers. Faisons couler l'encre.
It's I think that
Par le feu. Que l'encre coule.
like, what do you think the probability is that Israel could have killed him? Like, I think 100%. Guaranteed. Probably because they're afraid that by killing him it could make him harder and alienated.
Finesse. Précision.
Yeah, that's my best. It's a warning shot. Yeah, it's the optics of it. Yeah, not the right time. Yeah, he's in a bunker now.
best chance to eliminate Iran's nuclear program. This is not
Lune. Attention. Lune, attention.
that this was an existential threat to Israel. If you look at some of the strikes that Israel has launched on Iran, it's not just against Iran's nuclear program. It's against their missile capability, their nuclear scientists, as well as the head of the IRGC, Hossein Salami.
Voilà ta carte.
Strikes designed to decimate Iran's, not just their nuclear capability, but also their military writ large.
Yeah, Benjamin Netanyahu said in his address
I think that's actually the reason is that I think it bothers a lot of people.
Je m'en occupe. Prête à Paris. Lune.
What I've seen. I think a lot of people don't like the fact that Israel seems to directly and intentionally propagate the American people in order to make them sympathetic towards Israel by speaking their language, using metaphors,
Allez, on se secoue.
etc. And this alienates and it puts a lot of people in America on edge because, again, we just got out of a 20-year war in the Middle East. We don't want to go back. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel too. And I think that force now Palestine as well. So I think put all these things together. You guys see what I'm saying? And I think, oh, and then there's one more element that I'm not talking about. The last element of it that I think is also extremely important. It seems very, very that seems to do what Israel wants.
On détruit leur bouclier.
That makes them very like Americans, because it's like, again, like we're acting see if I can pull this up and this is self-report, but I don't want to derail too much, but I just want to show you guys this because I think that, like,
Faites attention. Ok. Lune, attention.
I saw Prime Minister of Israel. It was also not for nothing that the American administration has taken a step together with us in recent years.
Accélérons un peu le mouvement.
States, which determined that strong action is to be taken against whoever tries to boycott Israel. This is really tough. Like this could be a big leap. But either way, you know, you see something like this. Right? I mean, and this is going to alienate and bother a lot of Americans because we don't want to be propagandized by a foreign government. So yeah, that's it. Is that accurate, do you guys think?
À ton tour de briller. Finesse et grâce.
What is your assessment of the success of this Israeli strike?
Yeah, it's amazing from my perspective. I don't see how you can limit the amount of damage they've done, the decapitation strikes to their military, taking out a lot of the air defenses so they can do ground missions, and apparently no losses of aircraft or anything on their side.
And honestly, it makes, I mean, I don't know how, like if I was in
Sans la brûler. Attention.
it's pathetic.
It's another way game.
Let's be honest.
This is one heck of a
C'est pas bon
start
du
for
tout.
Israel to take out the most dangerous enemy in that region.
Is the Ayatollah next on the target list to
Une lumière.
I think he is always
Tel le
down on the
phénix.
target list, and I'm sure they went at him last night, and I don't know that he's been seen. So I'm sure if he's alive, he's hiding.
I mean, the dude. Great. This is like fucking. He's gotta be. Dead soon. He's 88 years old. Yeah, 86. Yeah.
Continuons d'avancer.
Things like this have a way of working themselves out. So of course they don't want to. Of course they don't want to have that happen.
Si je meurs, ainsi soit-il.
He may be dead, and he may be a follower. I think what
Pas de
Israel
panique.
needs to
Je suis là.
is how much damage they've done, and they'll get a good look at that right out with that. The next targets, and go ahead and ensure that whatever Iran does, it remains asymmetric. Iran's not an expeditionary military, so they can attack via what's after Iran took out most of them. But there's nothing they can do as far as military attacks, could be terrorist attacks, missile strikes, and drones.
Yeah, the Supreme Leader promising a harsh punishment for the attack, but again, we don't know if that came from prophecy or some of the other.
Yeah, and you know, I was wondering,
Of
Kim,
course they're gonna say that they're gonna wipe out Israel. Consequences, God's reign, you know, partially, and you know, like the hammer of God. Like, yeah, of course they're gonna say all of this stuff, but the fuck, like, I mean, yeah, it's like he's talking shit. Like, yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't think people are gonna Thank God. I'm so glad. And you know what, really? I think this is one of the really big things that's caused this to happen is the fucking internet. It's because these guys from Iran can get on the internet and they can see, and this is all over the world, right? They can get on the internet and they can be like, damn. Wait, what the fuck? And that, I think, changes everything. Except China? Nah, dude, my understanding with China is that people use VPNs in China and they're against the law in China in the same way that weed is against the law in America. Yeah, right.
The rest of the Iranian people understand that the Islamic Republic, the Ayatollahs, have left them behind the rest of the free world. So they wouldn't mind at all to have a change in government. Now, can they get that together based on this and in the chaos that comes? That's possible, and I hope it does happen. I hope that they do change their government.
I will say that if Israel keeps killing their military leaders, eventually they will destabilize the government enough to where the government can no longer govern the people. Eventually that will happen.
The thing that could happen is a succession battle. The supreme leader, if he's alive, is very old and feeble. He's going to die. There's already jockeying for position among the people who think they want to succeed him. If they start scrapping...
And I don't think any of the people that are going to take his position have the same type of figurehead status and, you know, appeal that he did. Everybody there knows him.
And the Iranian people get their game together. We all might be better off with anyone but them in charge in that country.
I'm glad you opened the door to jockeying the position, because yes, they may be happening with regard to the ultimate leader of Iran, but it's also potential for happening with who's in charge of the IRGC, because as we reported, Salami, who replaced Qasem Soleimani, was killed last night. So, one, is there a name that you're looking for to step up and take that position? The follow-up question is, who wants that position at this point, knowing that...
Alright, so the last two guys got blown up by missile strikes that hit their apartment plan for satellites. Next.
Faites attention. Ça me paraît
that position next.
Yeah, you look at Hezbollah's leadership chart with all those X's over the people who were running
Voilà ta
that.
carte. Une tempête
It's like
approche.
the joke used to be that you don't want to be the #2 guy for Al-Qaeda in Iraq because we kept killing him. I don't know.
Yeah, they just keep getting him.
Nobody wants it, and we heard that there was a strike on the media. So we don't even know who's left.
Listen to them celebrating extrajudicial killings.
Finesse et précision.
The idea of a literal heuristic error. Whenever they have someone.
À couvert. Je suis prêt. Fais attention. Fais attention.
The more of them who are dead, the less capable the rest will be. And the response from Iran will be, because of that, more splintered and less dangerous. So we're nowhere near out of the woods. This is what will be a couple weeks of battle. But it's not going to be a war. It's not going to be a ground war. It's not going to be a forever war or any of those things. And I think Israel is handling its business quite well.
Yeah, I mean, it is really brilliant on the part of Israel. If you think about it, Jim, because they didn't just target the nuclear sites or the missiles. It also seems like they pre-planned this, took out the people who would have the power to call for retaliation in an orderly manner. So clear chaos inside Iran.
And honestly, I bet, like, if I was in leadership, I'd be stressed out. I would be so stressed
À
out.
ton tour de briller. Faisons couler l'encre.
Really, I mean, because it's like now it's, oh shit. Now it's you. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? Yeah, who the fuck wants to replace these guys after they every single time? Well, the U.S. media is crazy on a single counter argument. This is propaganda. Well, I mean, okay, we'll look and see if there's anything from CNN. I'm sure they're going to promote this instead. Let me see here.
Retaliation looks like. Do you think that this is the most significant war that Israel has made since October 7th?
By far, this was always the existential threat. This was not just a threat to Israel, as some people like to pretend. Having an apocalyptic death in control of nuclear weapons was intolerable for the free world. So,
I think even the people that might not like want to help them do the strike, they're glad to have it. They would have been
Maintenant ou jamais.
So, yes, Israel has done the world a favor. We're a safer place right now, even with the chaos and the
Voilà ta carte.
Ça va faire mal.
by having slowed this down. And being able to
Les éléments denses.
at a certain point, yeah, when I'm rebelling, just get bombed again.
Danger. Et attention.
I don't think it's a death cult or anything. I just think they're a bunch of crazy psychos. Like, that's it. I mean, I don't think there's anything
Ton avenir.
there. I mean, that the people that are doing this are psychos. I mean, they obviously are.
On détruit leur bouclier. Bataille esquivée.
USA Today reported they are now the first non-binary performer to win in that Tony category. I mean, they multiple people. It was a piece just rendered nonsensical.
Accélérons le mouvement.
The non-binary dude here says he prefers they, them pronouns. Nevertheless,
Voilà notre chance.
the very gendered best leading actor.
I want to thank the other nominees, George and John and Carrie and
Can't forget Tigo from Friday. Let's find if this duo, the Queens of performed with Carrie, as that was my recorder. Gosh, then they things they pretend to. Get your buckets ready. This is.
This woman has been for so many years. I've admired her from afar. And this is the first time I've had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation because she's written a book called A Different Kind of Power. And I love that you call it that because the different kind of power is
Voilà ta carte. Finesse et grâce.
that you think are weaknesses or a tool. Sensitivity, self-doubt, and humility. Now, powerful. What I admire is that kindness as a principle.
I'll do what's gross, but we'll get through it together. It's okay. So what this is about empathy, self-doubt, and humility.
Someone constant, maintaining compliance. not be able to enjoy the freedoms of other New Zealanders. If you don't comply with the rules, you run the risk of forcing us to extend the period of lockdown. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear. covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth.
Single source of truth. Jacinda's truth, not the truth. Yes, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who imposed some of the most illiberal, inhumane lockdowns anywhere in the world. She even
So Trump actually talked about this earlier today. Here we go.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, the breaking news this morning, major breaking news. Israel says it has launched an unprecedented attack on Iran, targeting the country's nuclear sites and top military leaders, and the operation very much ongoing. The Israel Defense Forces say
I would say it was successful, too. I mean, it seems like they killed a bunch of their leaders. Seemed massively successful.
200 fighter jets striking more than 100 targets so far.
Holy shit.
And we just got new reaction from President Trump. We'll have much more on that in just a moment. Video.
God damn.
Prime Minister Benjamin
Sur moi! À couvert!
Iran State TV says the strikes killed several top military leaders and nuclear scientists, including 3 of the most powerful people in the country.
That's extremely fucking effective. I would. I mean, that looks extremely fucking effective.
Commander of Iran,
yeah.
Highest-ranking military officer.
Trump administration is still hoping that nuclear talks with Iran will go ahead as planned this weekend. Major escalation in the Middle East. CNN's Elena Green joining us right now for the latest on that angle. Elena, what are you hearing from the White House right now? From President Donald Trump. Before I get into it, that's on track with what we've been hearing now from the White House. Social website. He said that he gave Iran chance after chance to try and make this deal, but that they couldn't get it done. He said that he warned them of the manpower that Israel has, and that the hardline position during these negotiations with Iran over a potential nuclear deal are, quote, all dead.
Voilà ta carte.
Negotiate with them is just conveniently dead. Yeah, I've got a pretty good feeling that Trump knew this was going to happen.
There is always
yeah.
more brutal.
So that's what he's doing. Like I feel like that's clearly what's going on. He's letting Israel bomb them, like I said, probably helping them, giving them, like stuff on the back end. But and that's probably why they evacuated the U.S. embassies too. I feel like that's clearly. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to see the U.S. directly involved, but I don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. It's a fucking, it's an extremist theocracy. I don't want an extremist totalitarian theocracy country to have like fucking nuclear weapons. Absolutely fucking not. Why would anybody want it? And I feel like what that one guy said is that, or that woman said is that, you know, everybody might not necessarily support this openly, but there's a lot of people that are glad that it's happening. And I think that's right. I don't think anybody probably Iran to get nuclear weapons. They don't like Iran. Iran doesn't like them. Sure. Saudis are celebrating. Yeah. Why can Israel have it? Because we're allied with Israel and not Iran. That's that simple. But I mean, there is
kind of heard the president himself reiterate that. Now, a few things I also want to point out is that we did hear from Secretary of State saying, again, that the U.S. had no involvement in this and that Israel believed that this action was necessary for self-defense. But we do know as well that Trump administration officials, people here at the White House, they were given aware and prepared.
Yeah, they knew this was going to happen.
When we saw those strikes in Iran.
So is either with me or you're dead? Yeah, pretty much.
À ton tour de briller. Que l'entreprise.
Yeah, that's exactly like, I mean, do you remember whenever Trump was dealing with the Taliban? Or like whoever it was, that terrorist leader, and he said if there's any problems, he's going to kill your whole family? Yeah, that's straight up. That's exactly it. Walk around and find out how. Yeah, you either deal with it or like I don't know what else you want me to say. And also, by the way, this is the way that this has been done for thousands of years. It's not like this is some kind of new, you know, crazy, unhinged policy. This is the way it's always been. This is how the world works. And so IDF accuses Iran of targeting Israeli civilians with the strike in Tel Aviv. The world cannot stay silent. So this is an image of all of the places that have been attacked by Iran. Wow. And it was this Iranian state TV claims an Israeli fighter jet has been downed. I can pull this up, but let's go ahead and get back to this video here too. They hit an apartment building in Tel Aviv. I have to say, you know, like, I'm not a big fan of Israel. This sure seems a lot more industrial, right? If I see all of these missiles, what are the odds that every single one of these missile strikes and every single one of these missile locations is being sent at a military base or at a military leader? What do you think the probability of that is? It's zero, right? So, like, they're not. And so it's random. And so, like, when I think about this, and then Israel, it seems like they're not, and you look at the strikes that they're making and the people that they killed, and they just so happen to kill all of these different leaders. This seems like two different degrees of force here. You see one that seems like it's surgically focused on killing and taking out military personnel and military bases. You see the other one, which seems like it's bombing the entire fucking place. And like, again, you have to keep this in mind. This is from the IDF. This is what they're saying. Oh wow, what a surprise. The IDF is saying something that makes the IDF look like a victim. Of course, right? And it's important to keep that in mind. Let's think about that and be sure about that. But I'm just giving my opinion on this. And I don't think it's crazy for me to say what I'm saying. Whenever you look at the discrepancy and the disparity here, it's not crazy to say it's propaganda. So, I mean, but like, to what degree is it propaganda? Is the representation fake? Is the interpretation fake? Is it Photoshop? Is it video game footage? You've got to be a little bit more specific whenever you say that it's propaganda.
well.
I'm trying to be as accurate as I can be, okay, guys? Trying to do my best.
As these strikes were happening, that meeting, I would like to point out, was actually scheduled before Israel.
J'ai vu ton avenir.
Response would be. So again, adding to the point that they kind of knew about this. Now, of course, I think the big picture here is that one, President Donald Trump has not kept quiet about his frustration with Iran. Very slow pace of progression of talks over a nuclear deal. Again, to reiterate, they still want to have this conversation, not
And I think also, like, I mean, is this something that is America first? In a way, yes. In a way, no. Like, Iran nuclear weapons is an existential threat, but it's primarily not an existential threat to the United States. It's primarily an existential threat to the Middle East and the people over there. That's directly their problem. Now, maybe abstractly it's our own, but, you know, them having nuclear weapons. Does anybody think it's a good idea for Iran to have nuclear weapons? I don't think so. I think it's bad. So, yeah, it's probably Iran. Yeah, nobody thinks that. Everybody thinks that. Not everybody, but I mean, the people that thought it was a good idea, that they would kill. And so that's it. And so I think that that's the reason why people are okay with it. And, you know, you look at it from that perspective, would you want Donald Trump to support Israel, at least on the back end, making sure that they continue killing people and negotiate? Would you support Donald Trump on the back end individually? I think my answer with that is yes. Yes, I would.
salvageable, but of course, these attacks didn't slow that down. Another big question I have in answer to this White House today is whether or not
According to confirmed that the U.S. is assisting with the defense of Israel against the ballistic missiles fired by Iran.
De l'entreprise.
Yeah, it's confusing. Are they pretending to be mad about it, or are they just taking advantage of it? This is just the next best thing. That part is confusing.
Voilà ta carte.
Well, it just depends actually on Iran's ability
Not yet.
to retaliate.
I don't think so, not yet.
Whether the United States or others get involved. As you know,
We're going to pause this because we've got more popping off right here. Holy shit. Is this the new one? I think that's the old one. I'm like 95% sure that's the old one. I saw that one, never mind.
That Israel did it alone, bilateral. Here in Europe, our allies have backed off. They've said they had nothing to do with it. They haven't even said that they would like the last time join any protection of the skies over Israel like they did the last time. So really
On peut enfin traverser la mer.
more
watch
involved.
10 ways until you destroy him?
Actually calm down.
I don't know.
Some kind of ceasefire. That looks unlikely. And I
Holy
think what's
shit.
really interesting for the United States and for you all to figure out is what is coming out.
And somebody said Trump gave them 60 days, and yesterday was the 60th day.
Elle n'a plus l'air si loin maintenant.
I mean, that's a really big coincidence.
Tu veux
It was the
lancer
61st
une
day?
autre pierre?
Yeah, what
Les
a
autres nous
crazy
attendent, mais
coincidence.
tu pourrais l'atteindre.
This just happened to happen at just that time. Trump's credibility just hit a new paradigm with his threats. Yeah.
Israeli reporters are saying that there seems to be a much higher level of coordination
watching restreams, bro?
between the United
Well, no, they're
States
just
and
waiting for
Israel
it to
that is
attack.
being
I'm
sent
watching a video.
and that even some of the words, some of the actions, including potentially the so-called meeting
C'est
that's meant to be
vraiment
happening
important.
to continue a nuclear deal this weekend in Iran, that was all potentially part of a deception. So
So he just had them, basically,
Comme
do
je
you think
dis
maybe
toujours,
Trump
ce
just
n'est
had
pas la
them
pierre
plan that
qui
meeting
compte.
so they
C'est
let their
plus
guard
c'est
down
la
and didn't kill him? I mean, like,
Gustave.
I think there's a good chance Trump did that. Like, I could expect that.
to look at the extent of the U.S. action
That's dark,
on this
though.
and permission. What we do know
Yeah, I mean, it's a
is
war.
that Prime Minister
about nuclear weapons.
itching for this fight for years. And we also know that no other American president has allowed any Israeli prime minister to take this kind of action. This would be the first time that that this kind of action has been permitted or greenlit or whatever you want to call it by an American president. If you remember,
Axios confirmed that story. I'll pull that up after this.
out of the nuclear agreement back in his first term. From that moment when Iran was bound and had been verified by the international agencies to keep its uranium enrichment low, it started to produce at higher levels. And what appears to have triggered this movement now is two reports from the IAEA, which is the UN nuclear surveillance agency, which has said two things. One, that Iran has produced up to about 60%, which they believe is, significant, much more rapidly than they expected, and also...
I mean, what do you think the probability is that Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons? I would say it's 100%. Like, if I was Iran, I would want to develop nuclear weapons. You're surrounded by enemies. Basically, everybody around you is against you. Of course you would want to make nuclear weapons as a deterrent for people to not blow you up. Absolutely.
And a second report said that Iran had not allowed enough access, stonewalling certain access, and that is what caused the latest...
She's making this into a Trump bad story? I mean, I don't know about this. I mean, like, I think that there's a lot of people that are... It's a very, very tough thing, right? Because I think that there's a lot of people that are big Trump supporters that are also, like, huge isolationists. They don't want America to be involved in the Middle East, period. We can trade with them, we can deal with them, but I don't want to deal, like, we're not on any wars. They want America to play a Switzerland role and just let them blow each other up, fight each other, and not have to deal with it. There's a lot of people that feel that way, but there's also a lot of people that feel that, if Iran does have nuclear weapons, that this is a long-term threat to us. And this is and it could cause some sort of ripple effect that would negatively affect us. So like, but also true, right? And like, I think both of these perspectives, if you want my opinion, both of these perspectives are extremely valid. Like, insanely fucking valid.
Reports from the IAEA. Israel
Il se passe quelque chose là-haut.
Est-ce
qu'il y a? Amène-nous là-haut.
If it wasn't for, like, American voters being disillusioned after 20 years of war, being disillusioned after 20 years of war in the Middle East that has accomplished really, I think in the eyes of people, what have we really accomplished in the Middle East? We've replaced the Taliban with the Taliban.
Pour ceux qui viendront après.
I don't think that's mission accomplished, right? Nothing. We just got a bunch of kills. And so, like, you shouldn't be surprised when a lot of American voters don't want to vote to have more wars. Because the last one we got to get entangled with didn't get it. Nothing happened. I'm sorry, let you tell them again.
Including
that's all.
relative only 100 drones have been sent in retaliation. But no missiles yet. And also Hezbollah is not involved, Hamas is not involved, other Iranian proxies are not involved in breaking Israel apparently.
Yeah, well, what she means by that is they killed all the leaders of the terrorist organizations. And I have to say that, I mean, again, as somebody like, I don't like how much the U.S. helps Israel. I find it to be unsettling as an American and not an Israeli. But I gotta say, it's really impressive the fact that Israel just ends up killing all these guys. They are extremely fucking effective. Like, surprisingly and impressively effective.
That Israel was reaching what they call, I believe, a zone of immunity, something like that where something needs to be done before
they're good at black ops. They're really good at it.
Without it being able to be pulled back. So this is very complicated. The Arab states, including those who may, agree.
It's offensive. You don't care about collateral. I don't think you can make that argument. I don't think you can make that argument when the bombing of Israel looks like this, and the bombing of Iran's, the military leaders they were trying to kill looks like this. I just... I'm not seeing the same thing. I'm sorry.
The Abraham Accords with Israel are all calling for calm. And we'll just see where it goes next. And by the way, it was the Persian Empire and not the Iranian Empire. In Iran right now, the president is making a speech on state television to call for unity and also, as he said, to raise Iran's head up. Clearly, this also presents potentially a matter of survival for the current regime. Back to you.
Christian, thank you so much. Stick with us. Let's go to Oren Lieberman now. Oren, you've been covering this since the wee hours of the morning as this was playing out. I was watching you overnight. Is the attack over?
The short answer is no, it doesn't look like it is. We've been here,
obviously not.
In the Bureau covering the last 10 hours. Strikes occurred, facility in Natanz and a number of other places across the country. That's where we see that 200 fighter jets hitting 100 targets. But it looks like that number may continue to grow. The IDF spokesperson just got on camera a short time ago and put out a statement where he said the Air Force continues to strike in Iran over the recent hours. President Benjamin Netanyahu, who in his first video statement said this could continue for days. Israel has made clear that it has a number of goals here.
Yeah, that's the thing I showed you guys.
Destroying or...
I mean, you look at this, right? Does this look like indiscriminate civilian bombing? I don't think it does. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Like, this is... How much more precise can this be?
Mais nous voulons tous les deux ce qu'il y a de mieux pour
One example?
Désolé que tu
that's one photo. It is. Good point.
J'ai essayé de te prévenir.
Play out a number of Iran's military leaders
and I think the reason why is that I think that Israel probably cares more about not alienating everybody in alienating everybody in Iran. Because a lot of the people in Iran also hate the Iranian government.
Ne te mêle pas de ça.
Like, you have to keep in mind that, like, they had a complete fucking, like, 180 in 1979. So a lot of the people there hate the government there too, and so they might not. You have like a devil you know type situation going on, right? Where like many of them might not like the fact that Israel is attacking them, but they might also hate their current government. So I think Israel stands to gain or stands to lose a lot more if they indiscriminately bomb a bunch of places in Iran, because they could lose that little bit of good faith that the government, that the people there have, that effectively works in their favor against the Iranian government. And I think that that's the reason why it's in their best interest not to just indiscriminately bomb them. Because again, the majority of Iran in totality is not even Muslim. But it's run by a Muslim dictatorship. Or not, I mean, a totalitarian fucking theocracy. Most Israelis hate their government. Yeah, it's the most important thing here. But you can see that, right? Iranians love Israelis. Well, I don't know about love, right? But it's a Muslim, bro. What the fuck?
Va rejoindre tes amis.
Wait, what did I say something that was confusing? I mean, sometimes I'll just say things and I don't realize what I said. No, we don't. No, because all the Muslims don't love each other. That's not the case. Like, this Saudi Arabia and Iran don't like each other. They're both Muslim.
Alors c'est ainsi.
That's not the case.
Corps and the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Air Force have been killed as part of these strikes. The latter is significant because he was in charge of Iran's ballistic missile program, and that remains the great fear here, that Iran has the capability to launch hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel that could overwhelm Israel's air defenses. And he was also responsible or led Iran's retaliatory attack against Israel last April. So he has been, or had been, I should say, in this sort of scenario, and was clearly very high on the list of Israeli targets as they went after, again, not only the nuclear facilities and the ballistic missile facilities, but the top of the military and nuclear leadership in what is frankly a remarkable sweep of strikes in terms of the numbers, the targets, how far spread across they are across pretty much all of Iran and in a number of neighborhoods in Tehran itself.
Joining me now is best-selling author Douglas Murray. His latest book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization, hit the shelves last month. Make sure you get a copy. Douglas, let's start in the US with the Democrats, who are a broken party right now. They're leaderless, they're rudderless, and their solution to that is to spend $20 million to research how to win back American men. Yes, the plan, codenamed SAM, or Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, promises to use the funds to, and I quote, study the syntax, language and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces. Douglas, you're a man. What is your advice to the Democrats? How can they win back male voters?
One of them, I'd start by not talking about the virality of male spaces. I think that's immediately going to be off-putting. It's so strange, isn't it, Reed? I mean, tens of millions of dollars, well done to the consultants who've squeezed that out of Democrat donors and others. It's really, I could save them the money. I'll tell them now, all you have to do is to show male voters in America, as with female voters, simply that you're on their side. That you don't hate them, that you don't look down on them or regard them as second-class citizens. You don't think they should move aside or stay in their lane or hand over privilege or anything else. You just demonstrate that you're on their side and that you understand their concerns. And if you do understand their concerns, you don't then dismiss their concerns as being always racist, misogynistic, heteronormative, and so on. It's really so easy. But yeah, $20 million to some people who'll give worse advice than I just gave for free.
On a perdu le convertisseur de lumière. You should invoice, because I think that's far better than studying the syntax and virality of male space as well. Now let's go to Disney. There's reports that Disney and ABC bosses have urged the ladies of The View to just scale back some of their political commentary, perhaps tone down their anti-Trump diatribes, which can get a little bit demented. It's not gone well. Whoopi and co cannot bring themselves to even admit that there may be a problem or two in South Africa. Have a listen to this.
I made movies in South Africa. I've been in South Africa. I sent your son to South Africa to talk to people that I know who still live there. There's no white genocide, okay? There's not a genocide happening.
Douglas, I would love to see you on The View, but what's your response there to the ladies? Because Whoopi's made movies in South Africa, so everything's fine there.
Yes, absolutely. She must have really got a feel for the place on the movie set, I'm sure. It's such an example, actually, of what we were just discussing about this. Why can't they accept that the situation for many white South Africans is absolutely dire, particularly in farming communities? Why can't they accept that that might be the case? And it's not a zero-sum game. I can see what they're doing. This is the classic anti-Trump movement thing. If Trump says something, you can never concede he might be onto something. You've got to say he's onto absolutely nothing and laugh off any issue he raises, including really serious ones. People like the presenters on The View can say things like, well, why isn't he focusing on genocides elsewhere? Why isn't he focusing on X human rights abuse? Why human rights abuse? There are two things about this. One is, again, this is not a zero-sum game. Because many black South Africans get murdered in South Africa, mainly by other black South Africans. does not mean that no white South African suffers as well. And as for the sort of thing of prioritizing, I'd say that there's a very obvious answer that the Trump administration can give to this, which is there are many countries in the world that prioritize all sorts of human rights concerns, but very few that have even noticed the human rights violations against white South African farmers. And so, yes, if nobody else is mentioning it, if it's not the cool thing, the cool genocide for the view women to do, then nevertheless, it's perhaps even more so. It's something worth highlighting.
I just don't understand this complete hostility to granting asylum to a few dozen Afrikaners, South African farmers, who are going to assimilate well into any Western country, who speak English, who work hard, who are generally very law-abiding, Douglas. Why are people who are so pro-migrant, pro-open borders hostile to this? Is it purely a skin colour issue?
I think it's very largely that. And there's another underlying thing about this story, which I'm sure, like me, Rita, you can't help but notice. It's something along the lines of, it happens with many examples of hypocrisy like this, which is, it's not happening. It might be happening, but even if it were happening, it's not as bad as this other thing happening. And then the move to, okay, maybe it is happening, but they kind of deserve it in some way. I think that is underlying a lot of the coverage of this story. And generally speaking, if a group is being murdered or is being targeted for annihilation, the idea that you excuse it by saying that underneath all of this, they're guilty by dint of their skin color. Something that happened a generation ago now, 2 generations ago, would ordinarily be regarded as morally obscene. So why isn't it here?
Well, collective guilt seems to be in fashion right now. Let's go to Canada now, where King Charles delivered this land acknowledgement.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Shinabeg people. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
Douglas, what do you make of that? Is it necessary, desirable? Is it akin to a humiliation ritual?
I don't go in for the land acknowledgement stuff, but I'm in the fortunate position of not being the king and having to never make any misstep or upset any tribe, or literal or metaphorical. I mean, I thought it was a very dignified speech by the king. The one thing I would always think whenever I hear a land acknowledgement is it's for people in a country to decide if they want to do that sort of thing, for Canadians, for Americans, Australians. The thing that I always think when it does happen is I wonder whether this could ever happen in Britain or in Europe. Would it ever be the case that there would be a land acknowledgement to the First Peoples, the indigenous peoples of England, for instance, on whose land people stand? I never really hear that. Maybe there will come a time when things are so bad in Britain and Europe that people do start doing that, but it'll be some way off, I think, and there'll be a lot of retribution in the meantime.
There's parts of London you could start doing that right now. Just on the king, he is in North America. We know his son is in North America. There's a bit of conjecture that there may be a reunion with the prodigal son. Seems unlikely, Douglas, but would you like to see reconciliation given the king is battling cancer and he's not seen his son or his grandchildren for some time?
Yes, I mean, it's a very sad story on a family level, on a human level, that, the king has been ill, as you mentioned, and his second son is missing, and deliberately missing. I think, as you and I have said before, Rita, the real problem lies in the problem that Prince Harry and Meghan have created, which is it's very hard, I think, it would be very hard for any family to reconcile with and have private discussions with a family member, which at any point could be turned into another volume of autobiography or into a Netflix series. What could possibly be said? How could Harry be trusted, given the fact that he's in constant dealings with media platforms and constantly sounding off against his family? It's extremely hard to see. Unless Harry and Meghan learnt the amazing trick of sometimes choosing to be quiet, it's very hard to see how the king or the royal family can trust them.
Now, in the UK, we are seeing the rise of reform. Their surge in the polls continues. In a first-past-the-post system, they're right now well in front in a number of polls, ahead of Labour, comfortably ahead of the Tories. Is this the end of the two-party system in the UK? Can they maintain this momentum all the way to the election?
I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see, Rita. As you know, the electoral system in the UK is extremely cruel to third parties, insurgent parties, and so on. It's not like list systems like the Netherlands has, for instance, where there can constantly be parties that come up and take over and either rule well or otherwise and get chucked out or kept in power. It's just not like that in the UK. There's always been this expectation that the two-party system can't be broken. And I suppose people think back to the 1970s and 80s and the SDP and so on. But actually, of course, sometimes a party does die. And that was, of course, the case with the old Liberal Party more than a century ago. And the Labour Party, the Conservative Party. There's no law of nature that means they have to survive. The interesting thing for reform really will be whether or not they can demonstrate that it's not a one-man party, that it's not just Nigel Farage, and without him there really isn't a party. Nigel Farage is an extremely brilliant campaigner, exceptionally brilliant campaigner, and an incredibly talented politician. But in order to get anywhere near actually looking like he's a figure that can head a government, he'd have to surround himself with many people of an equal or similar caliber, and he's just never been able to do that. And I'm afraid that the infighting that Reform has already seen is a sort of a bad sign in that regard. Inevitably, a successful party has to be a kind of coalition, but also just has to have a lot of talent in it. Can Nigel Farage spend the next couple of years building that up? Perhaps. If he does, he's a serious threat to the Labour and Conservative two-party system. If he doesn't, I'm afraid it'll just be another of those strange electoral polling burps that happens usually midway through a very unsuccessful government like this one in the UK.
Now, you've been good enough to give some free advice to the Democrats tonight. If you could do the same for our Liberal Party, they're in crisis right now. They've had a landslide election loss, and they don't really seem to know, Douglas, who they are and what they stand for. There's a lot of advice that they can veer to the centre or left. But what would your advice be to a centre-right party that seems to be having a bit of an identity crisis right now in Australia?
Yeah, they are, aren't they? And of course, just like other centre-right parties around the world, they'll always get bad advice from people who wish them ill, and they'll take it. I'm afraid that's a routine
every time
with centre-right parties. Every time. There'll be people who would never vote for the Liberals who will say, I think what you need to do is to come further to the left and nearer to me and so on. No, I mean, for the party to be successful, like all centre-right parties, you have to show a set of things. You have to show a faith in the country, a love of the country, an understanding of people's need for belonging and aspiration, and much more. Particularly, by the way, that second one. I always say to politicians of the centre-right that, the left always has this very, very powerful tool, which it uses, my goodness, how it uses it, which is the tool of resentment. You've got to resent the rich man. You've got to resent these people, the powerful, so on. But centre-right parties have a very, very useful thing which they should be able to play back at it, which is aspiration. That is to show a means by which people who work hard in Australia, follow the rules, will actually be rewarded for it. And we'll see if they can make that happen. I hope they do. It's one of the most successful parties electorally in the West, and it deserves to have a future, but we'll see. As I said earlier, there's no law of nature that means that these parties just survive. They have to justify it. I'm not sure the Liberal Party's done a great job of that.
Fantastic advice there, Douglas Murray. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a great pleasure.
Joining me now is best-selling author Douglas Murray. His latest book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization, has hit the shelves. Get yourselves a copy. Douglas, we had some extraordinary scenes today in the Oval Office where President Donald Trump, in front of the media, sought to shame the South African president with the ugly truth of the anti-white, anti-Boer racism and violence in his country. He played a clip showing, among other things, politicians calling for white farmers to be killed. Astonishing. Kill the Boer, kill the farmer. Douglas, the South African president, claimed that anti-white violence wasn't an issue, and then he was played a fairly lengthy video showing otherwise.
That's right. By the way, the position the South African president had there must be now the least desirable seat in any political meeting, I think. You could see in his face that he thought, oh no, it's going to be Zelensky Mark II. It was a fascinating exchange. And of course, the denial from the South African government is not new. This is something that they have done for years. They've allowed the most appalling anti-white racism to go on in their country. They still, all these decades after the end of apartheid, find it very, very useful and indeed easy to allow anti-white racism to run rampant, and often with lethal consequences. I'm very glad that President Trump did call this out. It's maybe only President Trump among all world leaders really could have done so, and done so forcefully. But I would just look to the backlash that I would expect in the coming days from much of the media internationally, not just in South Africa, about this. I've already seen that, papers like The Guardian are saying, Donald Trump pushing conspiracy theories about the killing of white South African farmers. And I'd expect a lot more of that. They will join in the denial that the South African government has so gleefully engaged in for so many years.
The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa brought golfers Ernie Els and Retief Goosen to the White House with him to, I guess, diffuse tensions with the Trump administration. We know Donald Trump loves his golf, but it didn't go well, Douglas. Listen here as Goosen recounts his own family's story, adding further weight to Trump's claims about violence against white farmers.
Yeah, some of these buddy farmers got killed. The farm is still going. My brothers run it, but it's a constant battle with farms they're trying to burn the farms down to chase you away.
Douglas, you're right about the media. They're already in meltdown mode, trying to claim this issue isn't real, and the usual suspects are pushing this notion that any concern for this issue means you're racist.
Yes, well, that's something that much of the media has done for a very long time about that. There are even politicians in America today who are saying, why would President Trump push this issue as opposed to all of the other murders, massacres, human rights abuses that go on around the world? And there's an obvious answer to that, which is that there are actually a lot of people who speak about a lot of issues. Speaking about it and doing something are, of course, two very different things. But what President Trump has picked up here is one of those issues which other political leaders do not want to talk about. There are always, as it were, popular human rights issues, popular human rights abuses for politicians to latch onto. Look at the way in which the French, British, Canadian governments have been obsessing for the last week, as indeed for the last 18 months, about the exact amount of nutrition that people in Gaza have had access to in recent days. They do that because of a constituency at home that they believe wants to hear that, and because they believe that it burnishes their credentials as people at the forefront of liberal human rights issues. In fact, it takes far more guts to do what President Trump has done today, and as well as all of the other issues that he's highlighted and that many other leaders have highlighted, highlight one that has been conspicuously ignored by people who would otherwise hold themselves out as great defenders of human rights around the world.
And you could suggest it's been ignored precisely because of race. So those claims of racism,
yes.
Those making it perhaps need to look in the mirror. Now to another case of censorship and frankly madness in the UK, where a retired policeman was arrested and handcuffed in his own home by six officers from Kent Police, the same force he served for around a decade. And his crime, well, he tweeted something warning about the threat of anti-Semitism in Britain. As the Telegraph reports, police body cam camera footage captured officers scrutinising the 71-year-old's collection of books by authors such as Douglas Murray and issues of The Spectator, pointing to what they described as, and I quote, very Brexity things. Douglas, what is going on in your motherland?
It's pretty amazing, Rita. Like you, I sort of think I can't be shocked by the denigration of the British police and the British state. And then here, you wake up one morning and discover that police have gone into a man's house and are rummaging through his bookshelves and accusing him of effectively wrongthink. The man that they briefly handcuffed and then took down to the police station for hours of questioning had obviously extremely good taste in reading material. He not only had my international bestseller, The War in the West, he had copies of The Spectator magazine. This means that this is one ex-policeman at any rate who's definitely thinking about the right things and reading the right things. But what an extraordinary thing it is. That people in Britain have to live in a society where that would happen. And I can tell you something, Rita, like you, if the police went into people's houses and rummaged through their bookcases and found copies of some badly selling left-wing magazines and some left-wing authors' latest book, I would be incensed by that as well. Police have absolutely no darn right to do this sort of thing from any political direction. But of course they think they can in this occasion. There's one thing that does need to be said on this, Rita, and I said this in The Spectator, the magazine that the police in Britain don't want you to read, apparently, despite it being Britain's best-selling and oldest weekly magazine. There's something that has to be said. Kent Police, who had the audacity to do this, have solved in areas over which they have control 0 burglaries. I'll do it again. 0 burglaries. In areas where there have been hundreds of home break-ins, Kent Police have managed to solve none of those crimes, not one. So maybe there is a correlation, isn't there, between a police force that cannot police crime and a police force that would like to go around to a retired police officer's house and rummage through his bookcases and articles relating to his late daughter's death in a hit-and-run accident that was never solved. Maybe maybe they do that stuff
Allez au
because they
monolithe.
can't
Passez
do
par la
their
carrière au
job.
nord.
And that's the connection that I would like to see more people call out. Not just this thought policing, but the fact that the thought policing or the would-be thought policing is done by police forces that seem to have no ability to do actual policing.
Absolutely. And that is a widespread issue in Britain, isn't it? The failure of the police force to solve crimes, real crimes like break-ins and acts of violence.
Yes.
Meanwhile, we've got Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. Well, he's in danger of being arrested with some of the commentary he's been tweeting Douglas. Starmer's been morphing into Donald Trump if his work on X is to be believed. In the past couple of weeks, he's posted about coming for illegal immigrants. He said he'll put Britain first and then reliance to cheap overseas labour that's taking jobs from Brits. He posted, if you want to live in the UK, you should speak English. That's common sense. Bravo. He also said settlement in the UK is a privilege. That has to be earned. It's not a right. And he also said this about strong borders, that the Tories lost control of our borders and let net migration soar to record levels, undercutting hard-working Brits. I won't stand for it, Douglas. But is the Prime Minister going to get a visit from the constabulary for these sorts of non-crime actions? Oh, yeah. I'm actually a little bit surprised by how it's become such right-wing reaction.
Well, of course, if anyone else had said this, if I had said this, you would It's also true, though, that Keir Starmer has lost control of the borders. Almost 1,000 people came in a couple of days ago, in one day alone, on the illegal crossings across the Channel on boats organized by criminal gangs. When he says that it's not a right to land in Britain and just stay, he's right. It's just something anyone can do, however. It's just something that nobody in his government or his border force are doing anything to stop. They behave as though it's impossible to stop tens of thousands of people arriving just across the Channel every year illegally, let alone the hundreds of thousands of other people who arrive in the UK every year, legally and illegally, and get net migration up to almost 1 million in the last couple of years. But just as I say, this is the most cynical tactic, and I, at any rate, don't believe a word of what Keir Starmer says. I have heard politician after politician, Labour and Conservative, say this for decades. They always say the same pabulum. They say when they feel like they might need to just sort of enforce the base a bit, they say these things like, I think that people should speak English if they come to England. And everyone's meant to say, my gosh, what an amazing breakthrough. It doesn't matter a darn if you're losing your country all the time because you don't enforce your borders. This is I don't even know if Keir Starmer has seen these tweets. I'm sure he doesn't write them. His own Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary and others have distanced themselves from the language he's used himself. But it's just language games, Rita. That's all it is. It's language games. They don't do anything. Not in the real world. Thousands of people will continue to break into Britain every week illegally. And in the meantime, what do we have? Keir Starmer, the brave tweeter. Well, as you say, Rita, it's lucky that he's Prime Minister and not, for instance, a white or a working class mother in the north of England, or otherwise he'd be having his collar felt this evening.
Absolutely. Douglas, before you go, you've written a superb piece for The Telegraph about America's leftist media paying a price for their role in covering up Joe Biden's incapacity. It's been obvious incapacity for some years. You argue the fact that so many serious journalists denied what was obvious to all of us explains why trust in their reporting has collapsed. Is the damage too steep to fix, or can they restore their credibility?
Well, the interesting thing with the American media class is that so much of it just covered this up for years, not just the past 4 years, for many years with Joe Biden, even for the 2020 election. They were all rooting for him, and so they covered things over for him. And now they all say that they're brave truth warriors for writing books about it now. And they claim things like, there was a sort of cover-up from the White House about the extent to which Joe Biden was mentally incapacitated. There wasn't just a cover-up from the White House or Jill Biden. There was a cover-up by much of the American media, but not all. Just as not all the media was to blame for this. There is a fall-off in public trust in America as elsewhere in the media because of a concerted cover-up like that. But Rita, if that same political and media class had read the New York Post, they'd have been able to know about this 5 years before they themselves agreed and broke the story. If they'd have watched you, Rita, and me, Rita, on Sky Australia talking in recent years, they'd have seen that we knew something was up. We identified something was up. You and I weren't silent when Joe Biden was claiming that he'd just spoken to dead world leaders, or was wandering off stage and off script in ways that were weird even for Biden. So no, it's not everyone who ignored this. But it really is quite hard to stomach to see the very journalists who spent years covering up Biden's cognitive decline, now writing books saying, it turns out that Biden in 2024 wasn't peak Biden after all. And how could we have known? There were no signs, nothing to tell us.
Yeah, when it doesn't matter, suddenly they've got the breaking news. And it's been fascinating to see the reception they're getting from other leftist media who are treating all this as if it's some revelation when the rest of the country has known this, as we have discussed it for years. Douglas Murray, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Joining me now is one of the finest thinkers of his generation, best-selling author Douglas Murray. Douglas, we've got plenty to discuss today. Let's start with Bono, the preachy U2 frontman with a history of questionable tax arrangements. He's had some thoughts about USAID.
It's not proven, but the surveillance enough suggests 300,000 people have already died from just this cut-off, this hard cut of USAID.
Douglas, we've got Bill Gates also making all sorts of bold claims. He's saying millions